Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. Today, we're going to be talking about SOPs, and I have with us again Abby Roth. Abby, you want to do a little introduction for yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am the owner and microbiologist at Pure Microbiology. Um, I end up doing consulting, training, kind of anything microbiology related in the USP 797 world, and kind of beyond. So happy to be here again.
Thanks. And again, I'm Vivian from Pharma Salon. We do conferences and content for the compounding industry, but we are expanding into pharmacy. So I'm very excited about that. We'll be having our first event October 24th and 25th. And I will be sure to keep everybody posted on the developments of exactly where that's going to be and what the agenda will be. I also want to mention that we'd love to have questions and comments. So put them in the chat box of whatever platform you're looking on. So to begin, I was just telling Abby that we were talking about the importance on this and workshops and things like that. And often the time when I mention SOPs to other people and that we need to talk about it, and I only know this because some people bring it up to me, but other people are like, "Oh, what's there to talk about with SOPs? We've got them, we have them, we buy them." But apparently there's a lot more complexity, as Abby was just saying, other than just putting them down on paper. So maybe you want to say what you were just saying about how some people have them really small, or what the other challenges are, and why we
Yeah.
need to have this series.
Um, from the consulting clients that I've visited, we'll see SOPs where they have binders and binders of SOPs for everything that they do within their organization. And then some smaller critical access hospitals that I've been to have like a folder full of SOPs. So we really see kind of this like diverse world of what SOPs look like, but we're all doing the same thing. We're all involved in sterile compounding, let's say, and it's some people have really, really detailed SOPs for everything, and some are really like high level, which kind of based on where the chapter is going isn't really going to end up cutting it eventually. So it's definitely diverse.
And of course, it's important not just for the own running of your facility, but isn't this one of the most cited 483s is not following SOPs?
Yeah, either not having procedures in place or then not following them. And that's the really scary part, right? Where, hey, you have maybe these great SOPs in place, but nobody in your organization is following what's in the SOPs. And that sometimes comes back to just how the SOPs are written, how people are trained on them, how accessible they are to people. So there's a lot of things that kind of go along with the SOPs beyond just, hey, they're written and we have them in a binder or they're available electronically.
Check that box. They're over there.
Yeah, we have them.
Okay, and I just want to say this is part of a 3-part series. So, Abby, what are we talking about first today?
I think the most important thing to kind of just go over is what the new chapter is going to tell us about SOPs. And if you've taken a look at it, we have like 4 paragraphs and, well, maybe 3 paragraphs and a couple of bullets. So the USP 797 doesn't really give us a whole lot of detail. It tells us, hey, look, you have to have SOPs in place. You have to have a designated person who's responsible for making sure these SOPs happen to be like in place. But there's really not a whole lot else then other than, hey, you also need to review your SOPs every 12 months and you have to keep track of changes. So that leaves people who have no experience in writing SOPs like totally lost. So unless you're walking into an organization that already has good SOPs in place that you can work from, you're going to have a significant challenge if you're not comfortable or familiar with drafting an SOP.
So I have a question. Who is it how many people walk in and are assigned to write the SOPs who are brand new? Is this kind of a low man on the totem pole, so you get to write the SOPs, or?
I mean, usually though, we're in the last year or two, I mean, pandemic and even before that, and just some past experience, there's a lot of turnover with who ends up being leadership in the sterile compounding environment. Some people get in and they stay for a long time. Others, there's a little bit more turnover in that management world. So I've experienced in the last year or so, a lot of people coming through, training, and people that I've talked to, like, hey, I'm the new sterile products manager. And it's like, oh, you're now responsible for all of these SOPs. And maybe you're not the one writing all of them, but you're responsible for them. The nice part is that you can like divvy out who's going to do what. And I really encourage that if you have some awesome technicians who do an amazing job with hand hygiene and garbing, let them handle writing the SOP, and then just have that designated person responsible for the revision or the review of it. So use your staff. I mean, if you have somebody that's outstanding in a particular area, have them write the SOP. They'll probably do an amazing job at it.
That's a great idea. It really takes the burden off of one
Oh
person
yeah,
figuring
one
it
person
all
can't
out.
write all of these SOPs. It would take them forever.
And then what? Okay, so you said the proposed revision here. My questions. The proposed revision of the chapter indicates facilities need SOPs for the compounding process and other support activities. So what does that really mean?
Yeah, that's the compounding process is easy, right? I mean, we all know what that's going to be like, but support activities is everything else that supports the compounding process. So that's garbing, that's environmental monitoring, that's maintaining and managing the facilities, it's cleaning. And those are kind of the easy ones that you think of initially. The ones that you kind of get lost or you don't really think about are your quality management ones. So how are you going to write your SOPs? Like, you need to have an SOP on how to write SOPs so that there's consistency in making sure all of this is done the same way. And then how are you going to go about changing SOPs? How do you handle corrective and preventative actions? How do you handle recalls? So some of those things are beyond just the day-to-day. How do we get drugs in? How do we do our preparations? And how do we get them out and checked into patients?
So how often do you see that people have checked the obvious boxes but left out all these other things?
Actually, I've seen that quite a bit. And usually the organizations that have kind of struggled with the SOP writing are the ones that have basically just taken the text in the chapter, chopped it up, and stuck it into a document, and they haven't really applied what they do to the SOP. They haven't written their specific detail in there. So they'll kind of go through the chapter, hit everything that's in the chapter, and it's like, look, I have SOPs for everything, but do you really? And most of the time they're missing some of those other, components, because unfortunately, SOPs got written years ago. They haven't really been updated. They're in a binder. Nobody kind of really cares too much about them. You still have word of mouth training instead of training per the SOPs, and they kind of just get dusty sitting there sometimes. So.
Right. Okay. So what about templates? Don't they must cover all those boxes?
Yeah, some of the SOP templates that you can purchase do a really good job of not only your compounding process, but training through behavior, facilities information. What do you do if you have a temperature excursion? So templates are definitely an option. They have probably everything that you need as a basis in there, but you still have to go in and make them your own. So it's not just an off-the-shelf product.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say I've heard, and I think you and I probably have had this conversation, how even though you buy the template, you have to go through and really customize it for yourself.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So
everybody's different.
Right. Okay, great. So how, and you started talking about this, but how detailed do the SOPs need to be? And also, I think we want to talk about, we've touched on this in the past, and maybe everybody knows this, but I don't, but there's a difference between SOPs and policies, right?
Well, so the way that everything had been broken out before, it was listed as policies and procedures. So you kind of had your overarching policy on this is how we generally do something, or this is what we follow, versus the step-by-step instruction on how to do it. So different organizations might call them different things. You might have policies and procedures. You might just have standard operating procedures. We're kind of seeing the more like move to, hey, we call them SOPs, but we have some policy statements in the beginning that state this is how or why. And policy statements are sometimes more like why we are choosing to do something versus once you get to the procedural part of the SOP where it's your step-by-step on how to do it.
Okay. Because when you're getting inspection, and this is why I've asked, where do they delineate that? Not following policies and not following procedures, or is it
I
all the
mean,
same thing?
it's pretty much getting lumped into all the same thing. You
Okay.
say you're doing whatever, are you actually doing that?
Okay, great. So let's go back to the details. How detailed does it need to be?
Detailed to the point that, Vivian, if you're training me on how to do something, you could really just hand me the SOP. I read it. You not give me any more verbal instruction, and I can go do whatever is written in that SOP. Obviously, there's going to be some nuanced things that as you go through, aren't exactly going to be in the SOP, but I should be able to pick it up, read it, and know what I'm expected to do. And that's where I've mentioned earlier that I've seen those SOPs where it's just copy and pasted from the chapter. And it's like, we all know the chapter doesn't tell you how to do anything. The chapter tells you what needs to be done, but there's no real instruction on how to go about doing it.
Mm.
And that's why the SOPs are so important, that you have that how-to information in there.
Okay, great. The chapter also indicates the changes to the SOPs needs to be documented. What is the best way to do that?
Yeah, so this is where you need to have an SOP on how to handle changes to SOPs and updates to SOPs. So, once you realize something has to be done, you have to have instructions in an SOP on, okay, here's how we start initiating the change. We're documenting that we're making this change. Is that going on a form that's paper, or is it electronic? Once we decide, we receive the request, hey, we need to change this, who else needs to know before we just go and change something? Letting that individual know, making sure that they agree that, yeah, this is the appropriate change to make. And then capturing that in this form all the way through the process. Here's the start. Here's what we've done to make the changes. Here are the changes. Here's the final version of what this looks like. And then maintaining a version of the previous so that in the event there's ever some, issue where an inspector comes in, surveyor comes in, or whatever, you can kind of go back and say, hey, yeah, this was our previous SOP. This is how we used to do it versus this is our new SOP and how we're doing it now. So having some kind of change control system, and really that's what the quality world ends up calling it, is you have some system to control all of the changes that get made, and everything should be documented and easy to find.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I wanted to ask you a little bit about where you said some templates. Is there a way, if you want to buy a template, to vet what's good and what's bad?
I mean, really, you want to take a look at, they should have some kind of index or master kind of list of what all of the SOPs are going to be, or a table of contents or something like that. As you're going through that, you want to look for kind of your big SOPs. Are there quality related SOPs in there? How do I draft SOPs? How do I change my SOPs? What do I do for corrective actions? Is the recall, the adverse event, those types of SOPs, included in there? And then you have your regular kind of day-to-day stuff. Do they cover cleaning of the clean room and the primary engineering controls? Am I getting everything that I need to know on environmental monitoring, incubation, analysis, how to collect the samples? So really vetting that, and ideally you want to have forms with them too. So not just SOPs, but if they can provide you with the forms that would support capturing the information that you need, that's also helpful. Now, many people are using systems like, Simplify or some of the other ones out there where it's electronic, they're dumping all of their information in there. So forms might not necessarily be a deal breaker for them, but if you're paper-based, you definitely want to get those templates with forms for sure.
Okay, excellent. That about covers all of my questions. Do the templates or the train? Are we going to talk about training in the future, or do the templates or anything else? Do they touch on training? Because you said that was a really important component.
Sure. So the templates should have some kind of information on the training, what competencies are going to have to be included, ideally to the forms that are going to be used to capture all of the competency information. So those are some of the things that should be included in there, as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. We're going to do, for everybody who's listening, we're going to do our next one on the 28th. what are we on, March? Is that what we said? Yes, April 28th. So I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, have a great month.
Yep. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Bye. Thanks.